What's up everyone, Drew Binsky here, and welcome to part 4 of the scariest stories that have happened to me around the world. As someone who's been to 195 countries, of course there are those moments that are really scary or dangerous that often go undocumented or unnoticed, and that's why I like to make these videos to share with you some of the more vulnerable moments that I have as a traveler. And I think a lot of you guys want to hear these things, and a lot of you guys can relate to some of these stories. So we're going to kick it off right away with something that happened to me in the Libyan airport. Let's start off by getting the visa into Libya because it was the most expensive visa I've ever had to get, and it was also a nightmare. I was traveling around Africa on a big trip in 2019, and then I ended in Syria. And then in order to get the Libya visa, I had to either fly to New York to the embassy or go to Rome, to the Libyan embassy in Rome. So obviously Rome was closer, so I flew to Rome for a full week, and I waited to get the visa, which I paid extra to expedite. And I had to stay in Rome, and I had to keep renewing my hotel every night because I wasn't sure when the visa was going to be done. The people working at the embassy were not friendly, and it was very, very difficult and challenging. It ended up costing $3,000 total to get the Libyan visa if you factor in the flight to Rome, the hotels that I had to buy in Rome, and the cost of the visa itself, which is crazy. Also, I should have mentioned that in order to get a visa to Libya, you have to be on a business visa because they don't issue tourist visas. That means I had to pretend to be an oil consultant because that was what we wrote on the application. And literally, once again, that's the only way to get into Libya. And in order to get the business visa, you have to be on a business trip. So I had to buy some nice clothes, I had to get a briefcase, and I had to leave my bags behind in Tunisia, which was a pretty interesting experience to say the least. So I go to the airport, I board my flight, and I get into Tripoli. Actually, the airport was about 3 hours east of Tripoli because the Tripoli airport was not functioning. And so I get on the plane, I arrive, and I'm really nervous, of course, and I go through customs, and I go through immigration, and they ask me some questions like, who are you, what's your name, what are you doing here? So I just answered, I'm an oil consultant, and then they said, go to the other room, and I was like, oh great, here we go. You never want to get that call, go into the other room, they ask you for more questioning, and it gets pretty scary. And as I'm telling these stories, I'm reminded of how anxious I was in these situations. By the way, I'm not stamped into the country yet. This is like before he stamped me, he told me to go to the other room. So I walk through, and I'm sitting in this little tiny room, about half the size of the room I'm in now. I sit down, and there's 2 Libyan guards like standing there looking at me with pretty intense eyes. They speak very broken English, and my Arabic is even more broken. I can speak maybe 20 phrases in Arabic. So they asked me what I'm doing there, and I said, I'm an oil consultant and I'm here for a project. And they said, what's the name of your company? And I didn't have a business card or anything, so I just said, oh, I'm self-employed, like I'm a solo consultant, which, I mean, I guess that's possible. And they really didn't believe me. And so we were stuck in the room for maybe 10 minutes, which felt like an hour. And I'm like starting to sweat, and my phone's not working because there's no signal there. And I couldn't even take out my phone. I wasn't in a good situation to do that. And I did have my camera, my bigger DSLR camera in my bag, which I was told not to bring. And so thankfully they didn't go through my bag, because if they did, it would have been a huge nightmare. And I didn't have my drone. A drone would have sent me to prison. So I'm standing there, and I'm like literally scared. I don't know what to do. I'm trying to convince these guys that I'm a good person, that I can come into Libya, and they're not really budging it. And all of a sudden, as they're talking amongst each other, they're kind of murmuring, and I'm just standing there like, they're looking through my passport. Oh, why do you have Syria visa? Why do you have Egypt visa? Why do you have Turkmenistan? And then you can see their eyebrows like popping. And while we're sitting there, all of a sudden I hear this. Literally sounded like a machine gun. My reaction was freak out. So I jumped out of my seat, I grabbed my bag, and I bolted out the door. And I started running, and everybody else heard it, and they were kind of alarmed, but they weren't freaking out as if like there was a shooter inside the airport, like I thought. So I get down the hall a little bit, and then the police officers come out kind of with a half smile on their face, and they're like, come back, come back. I was like, what happened? There's a shooter, what, are you crazy? And they do this, like, poof. So apparently someone had lit fireworks right outside the airport. I mean, we're talking like right outside the building, which, who does that? Like, who lights fireworks right outside the airport? And so that was what the sound of what I thought was gunshots was. That was like one of the most scared I've ever been in my whole life. Like sitting in that back room with the Libyan officials and thinking that there's a shooter in the airport. I thought like, okay, my life's gone. This is crazy. So go back in the room, sit down. I mean, I'm like all fired up, and it almost like calmed them down a little bit. And then finally, thankfully, I had the number of the driver that was gonna pick me up, and I had his name, I think it was Mohammed. And so they were able to call Mohammed, and Mohammed knew to tell them, in case they called, that I'm an oil consultant and I'm gonna be there on a business trip just for 3 days and I'm staying in Tripoli, which they believed. They escorted me back to immigration, stamped my passport, and then they walked me out of the airport. And when I got outside that airport and I smelled the not so fresh air, the hot, humid air of Libya, I was so happy because I knew that that was one of the hardest countries in the world to visit. What's up, Libya? Country number 184. Man, that's scary.
Yeah.
That was like the most scared I've ever been in an airport. They were questioning us, what's our job? We were like, oil consultant. They said, what company? I said, oh, we work for ourselves, and they didn't believe it. So then I had them call the driver who was right in front of me. Whew. We made it. Oh God. We made it. And in the end, it turned out to be incredible. We visited a place called Leptis Magna, which is an old Roman ruined town. It's just so beautiful. And then in Tripoli is just like this really awe-inspiring Italian influence from the Italian colonization, and the food is great, and it's just there's these old Roman ruins in town, and there's a beautiful old square and a market, and it's just really, really cool. So that is the crazy story I wanted to share with you from Libya. For the next story, we're gonna hop over to a town in Iraq called Al-Chibayish. I was there, one of my more recent trips. It was about 8 months ago. I was in Iraq with my buddy Alvaro. We were road tripping solo. We had a driver. We were in the marshlands. In southern Iraq and southern Iran, there's these marshlands. They're called the Mesopotamian marshlands. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its beauty, and there's these marsh Arabs that are living on the water, on the wetlands. And the only way to get from point A to point B is by boat. It's a really unique wetland ecosystem in the middle of a really hot desert. So we went down, and the town is called Chibayish, which is like the nearest entry point into the marshlands. And I made a video about this place, which I'll link right there, and it's a really, really amazing story. We have our experience on the marshlands. It's great. Everything's fine and dandy. We meet some cool people. We ate maskoof, which is a local freshwater fish, and it was really a wonderful experience. When we got back into the town, I found myself walking through the market, trying to, shoot a little $10 video and try to get some budget travel stuff going on and just get some good content, really, because it was such a unique part of Iraq. Alvaro stayed behind in the car. He did not join. I was with another local friend named Hussein. He was a little bit away from me, like 50 feet away from me, and I was shooting on my GoPro. So I didn't think it'd be an issue, and I held it on my chest because I wanted to keep it like away from people. So I'm shooting, I'm recording, I'm going through the market, and all of a sudden, someone grabs my arm like this, and I'm like, I look over, I thought it was my friend. It was the police. I'd been shooting in Baghdad, I'd been shooting in Samarra and some other, places, Karbala, Najaf, and I didn't have issues with the police in public. And I thought, oh, this is like the safest part of Iraq, this would be fine. It was not cool with them. It ended up being a huge ordeal. First of all, they asked where my friend was, and I had to like flag him down, so that was scary. And then my friend starts talking to him, and they're like, oh, what happened? Why is he filming? Who is this guy? Why is he here? And I was like freaking out. I stepped aside like, what do I do? As soon as I said it's super safe here, we got busted by the police. I didn't have my passport on me also. My passport was left in the car. Slowly I went behind the scenes and I kind of went in my phone and I deleted a bunch of pictures because they don't like to have pictures for whatever reason. And so then they start dragging me to the police station by myself. My friend is left behind in the market. He actually went back to the car to try to find Alvaro and our driver. And so then I'm left there again with the police, and they start walking me to the police station. And that's a place that you don't want to go in Iraq. You don't want to go to a police station anywhere in the world, especially in Iraq, when you don't have a passport on you. And my phone was working, I had a SIM card, but it wasn't working that well because the town is very remote and it wasn't like a big city. So I'm in the police station. My friend catches up to me finally, and we're in the back room, and he asked for my passport, and I'm like, I don't have my passport, but I'm Spanish, because Alvaro was Spanish, even though he wasn't with me at the moment, but every time you say you're Spanish, they get excited because they talk about Barcelona or Madrid football team, and I know nothing about soccer, but I do speak Spanish, and so I was able to hablar un poco de español, and I spoke to the people and the security police, and then they thought I was Spanish, and sure enough, they had a little joke that I was from Spain, and they love football, and they're naming all these players, and I'm like, okay, whatever. It's still really scary to be in a freaking police station. When they open the gate to the compound, you hear this like creaky sound, and I'm just like, who's gonna come here? The biggest risk is being kidnapped. The police just has to call one friend and be like, hey, we got an American, I guess a Spanish person here, he's probably got a lot of money on him and he probably has a lot of equipment, so let's rob him, let's kidnap him. And that was my biggest fear. Turns out, you know, the police ended up being nice people in the end, and they did let me go. They did check my phone, and thankfully I deleted a lot of those photos and videos that I took. And at the end they were just like, you need to be careful what you're shooting. Don't put the camera in anyone's face, which I wasn't doing. I was shooting general shots of the market. But lesson learned, be careful in Iraq, and always have your passport on you, because that's really, 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 really important. So yeah, Iraq was an amazing country. I think you guys have seen, I hope you've seen my videos there. I've made over 10 videos in Iraq, and just a wonderful country filled with beautiful architecture, smiles everywhere, and it's just a really humble culture and delicious food as well. So that is my story about Iraq. Third and final scary story I'm going to share with you today is a general travel story to Mogadishu, Somalia. Right off the bat, Mogadishu is the most dangerous city in the world. Somalia is not the most dangerous country, it's one of the most, but in terms of cities, Mogadishu, they've been in constant civil war since 1991, the year I was born. Constant. There hasn't been a single break. There's been a lot of different offshoot Al-Qaeda, ISIS, terrorist groups all over the place. Al-Shabaab is the name of one of them, and it's very unstable. There's kidnappings, bombings, gun violence, all kinds of explosions and terrorist attacks, and it's unfortunately that's the case of Mogadishu, and I knew that going in. And so I met my good friend Lee Abamanti. He flew from the US and he met me, and we jumped on a plane from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and we got into Mogadishu, Somalia. So our buddy Bashar joined us. He's a Somali guy, but he lives in Juba, South Sudan. He was my local friend there, and he was able to help us get the visa, which is also hard to get. So we arrive at the airport, and you have to go through like a maze to get out of the airport. There's dogs everywhere, like canine sniffing dogs, and people looking at you, and it's just crazy. We get in this taxi, and they said the hotel is 1 mile away. It's called Peace Hotel, ironically. And so I'm like, oh cool, 1 mile, it'll be like 2-minute drive, right? It took about 25 minutes to get there because there's so many checkpoints from the airport to the hotel. Checkpoints, they'll just stop you. The military will be like, who are you? Where are you going? The windows in our car are bulletproof and they're blacked out, so nobody can see inside. And then there's all these like barricades. And then we finally get to the main gate of the hotel, and you check in and they have our name on a list. And then literally you have to drive like this, then you turn and you drive like that, then you hit a dead end and you turn like that, and then you make another turn, and then they lift up a gate and you go through the gate, and then you go down and up, and then left turn again, right turn again, and finally you get to a door. Then you get your bags out, go to the door, you take off your shoes. It's like the airport. Take off your shoes, empty out your bag, and believe me, they empty out your bag, check everything on you, ask you questions. Then you get into the main compound of the hotel. Then you go check in, and this amazing guy, he greeted us. The first thing he did was he's like, all right, we need to give you a safety briefing. And we're like, all right. So we go downstairs in like a bunker. This is like straight out of a movie, like this room that we entered. And remember, we are in Somalia, okay? We open up this door, and there's all these giant screens. I felt like I was in a simulation with all these massive screens, and there must have been at least $10,000 worth of equipment down there. It was wild. So he goes and sits in his chair, opens his computer, which is how he's controlling everything, and he opens up this massive map of the city. I mean, it probably takes up my whole wall behind me, right? And it's Mogadishu. And there's all these little red flags everywhere. There must have been 100 red flags, okay? He looks at us and he says, see all those red flags? Those are all the bombings and terrorist attacks that have happened in Mogadishu over the last few years. He also had cameras set up around the whole city with live footage of what was happening in all the main squares and everything. This guy knows safety, he has all the connections, and I was just like mind blown by the system that he had created for security. I mean, it was unbelievable. So he spent about an hour explaining to us where we're gonna go and what we had to do and why we had to stay safe and all this stuff. And so we went to bed and we woke up the next morning and we were gonna go see some sights in Mogadishu, right? The 2 trucks, pickup trucks, pick us up, and we are in a Jeep with bulletproof everything, windows, doors, and blacked out windows, okay? And in the front of us is a pickup truck with 4 armed guards with like bulletproof vests, helmets on, and huge guns, AK-47s or similar. 4 guys sitting on the pickup truck in front of us, and they're both in each corner of the bed of the truck. Behind us, 4 more guys all decked out in gear, guns, finger on trigger in hand. So we have 8 military guys, fully loaded, ready for combat. And we're driving through the streets of Mogadishu with all this crazy security. And so I'm like biting my nails in the back of the seat of the car. And I'm like, what is going on? I hope we're gonna be safe. We went to this lighthouse and they dropped us off and we pulled up, we stopped. And then they said, okay, wait 5 minutes. We gotta do a scout of the location. And so all the 8 military guys jumped out the car and like, I watched them from the window. They would like literally peek over the fence, look through everything, go under places, and like just scout out the whole area, like full on scouting out. It was wild. Then they're like, okay, you have 10 minutes only. Go walk on the beach and go look at the lighthouse, take your pictures, and we're out. So we're like, okay. So I'm like, what? Like in all the background of my GoPro shots, my videos in Mogadishu, the guys are there. It's like, it's wild. So we're going around taking our pictures and then they're like, okay, you got everything? Go back in the car. So that's how we went around Mogadishu. It is crazy. We went to an ice cream place where I met my buddy Dan. What's up, Dan? And we got ice cream together, we hung out, and then I found out a few months later that that whole place was shot up and like 20 people or so were killed in that ice cream place. So Mogadishu is just crazy. You always gotta be on your toes. You gotta be expecting something and you just gotta be careful for if something goes wrong, here's how I'm gonna react. Here's how I'm gonna prepare myself. Of course, we don't want any of that to happen. I think Somali culture is beautiful. I love Somaliland. I love the food and the people are so friendly, but Mogadishu really, truly is the world's most dangerous city, and I'm just glad that I made it out safely. What a crazy experience. Thank you guys for tuning in. You know, I like talking about these things, and I feel like a lot of you guys like to hear it because as much as I love to go to the Middle East and go to Asia and sit on the floor and eat with my hands and share with you how hospitable these people are and show you the wonders of the world, I think it's important to not ignore some of the dangerous parts about this lifestyle, and I want to be transparent with you guys and let you know what life is really like to visit every country. So with that being said, thank you for watching. I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great day and take care. Bye-bye. I'm Drew Binsky, and if you like my travel videos, please click subscribe and ring that little bell so you can get notified on all my upcoming videos as I take you to every single country in the world.